Year of our Lord, 927. This journal entries have the purpose of creating a ledger over the accounts of the Sons of Dismas. Time passed slowly at the fortified monastery. I was under constant watch from my half-orc wardens. Much changed in the years I ended up staying there. I am now addicted to alchemicals. I have to keep taking a token dose every day lest my mind will rapidly deteriorate. Am no longer able to enjoy pleasure as I once did. Everything is toned down. My senses are messed up. I need overstimuli to be able to feel anything for a fleeting moment, as the reward is always fleeting and leaves a deep void and ache behind. Everything in my head has become calloused. Prayer feels harder than ever. I do it as best I can, yet I grow more astray from God with each passing day. I was offered more alchemicals to balance this out. I refused. No more side effects. What is left of me still clings to a remote sense of self. I will not risk losing all my faith. Through the blood of Christ, my salvation is secured. I know this, even if I feel damned. My feelings have nothing to do with my salvation. The blood of Christ does. If there is anything required other than the blood of Christ, I am surely damned. Good. I want nothing else than to serve him. I am best used for war. I am ready to fulfill our Lord's words and die by the sword, as by the sword I lived. The world outside the monastery changed a great deal during my recovery. Cruniac's gut, the clouds that were obstructing the sun, grew and spread in height. Hills that used to be above it were now covered. Entire bergs were swallowed by the ever-flake-raining living clouds. Most of the livestock had been turned to dried meat by this point. Without the sun's direct light, there was not enough feed for the animals. The vegetation was long dead at this point. The animals died, migrated, or were consumed. Pigs became the new currency. Pigs and poultry. Sometimes fish. They were the cash crop of every noble or petty merchant. They were the link that was used to turn the dried flesh of Cruniac, the living mountain, into edible stuff. The animals that ate the meat became bad in the head somehow. Humans grow insane from eating Cruniac flesh. Animals also go afoul. The Cruniac flesh is shipped by wagon. The oxen that pull the wagons are mostly grain-fed from the reserves the nobles have. Although I've seen oxen with alchemically altered guts that were fed straight pork. Not a wholesome sight. The trees somehow were kept alive. They had no leaves on them, but they were in a winter-like state. The orcs were more of a menace than they were before. They somehow were allowed to feed on a certain side of Cruniac, on a specific kind of dead flesh. They were literally cleaning or pruning the demon mountain, and the Cruniac throngs were keeping them safe. It is from this safety that unprecedented numbers of darkbloods descended from the north onto the anvil that are the bergs. Even in such a ramshackle state of affairs, even with all the inner turmoil, the bergs can muster a formidable force to stand against the encroaching dark tide. Terrors from the deep have started to appear, using the rivers to move about the land. An army from a long-gone sunken empire has surfaced with grim intent. The deep corpses of the mummified dead are puppeted by the deep sea-fey. They seek our land fey to feast upon their bodies. The fey we are accustomed to seem to be asleep. No longer have they been active in the areas that once were crawling with their ill will. That does not worry humanity as much as it should, is what I think. If the land fey are at sleep, and the sea fey have used this opportunity to take them over, we should act to protect the devil we know. Being passive with this affair will doom humanity. The sea-fey within their undead army have already encroached at the base of the Meander River. They also probe the nearby large rivers, using ash vein, grave wash, pale coil, and leaden flow to move about undetected until the moment they decide to strike. So far, they have not struck deliberately at a human settlement, as they seek the dormant fey. Such is their conquest, that they seek the places with the largest anomalies, where the old land fey seem to reside. This means that they march their puppet armies to protect their fey eating procedures in the areas that we as a race have learned to contain and isolate from. My concern is that we will avoid confrontation with this eerie foe and allow them to feed. We know nothing of this foe, except that it has its way on our land so far unchallenged. From the northbound World's Edge Mountains, worms have started to probe deep within the Berg territories. Dragons have always been prominent, if distant, figures of authority within the old world. Other than the occasional foray for treasure into the most powerful human lands, they have kept to their slumber. A large number of patrolling fledgling dragons have been spotted by our floating fortresses. They seem to seek out and map the areas that are above Cruniac's gut cloud barrier. Emperor Eldric Ermenguild's scouts speak in warning of a new emerging threat posed by a coalition of 5 elder dragons. Somehow they have managed to breed with unprecedented success, allowing their force to use a large number of young worms. Dragons are very hard to properly counter by a human force. A foe that can field several of such adult creatures would be almost impossible to tackle. A notable development is the Emperor's dwarven employment on the northern Berg's defense line. A humongous construction process that uses darkblood slaves, indentured toil, peasant, and questorial levies labor. This project unites the whole Bergs in a uniquely joint effort aimed at placating the numerous threats of the north. Within this process, the start of a comparably ambitious project has taken place. With dwarven support, the erection of Babel Towers has started. The Babel Twins, Babel 1 and Babel 2, structures that are supposed to pierce the living cloud barrier and have a footprint as large as a small city, are to be erected using dwarven help. The 2 towers are supposed to house and feed a humongous population that will support further Cruniac exploitation and the manning of the northern defense line. These projects are supported by Eldric Ermenguild and are to be financed by his limited estates and his future military campaigns. So looting in future wars. In other words, the world as I knew it had gotten worse. The people as I knew them changed. Everyone ate pork, eggs, and fish. They found a way to make booze out of blood. Alchemically. Blood booze it is. Tried it. Tastes nothing like blood, but it's still foul. Switching from grain to animal products made everyone stink worse. Nobody knows why, but it's true. They've also managed to make the cows and horses eat meat. This, along with the high-rise pastures, allowed us to keep token numbers of most grazer breeds in case we ever got out of Cruniac's gut and nature got a chance to recover. Everyone was on iron rations, eating to stay alive, to fend off civic degradation. The Christian spirit was hard-pressed. Hungry people are less prone to turn the other cheek, I guess. God have mercy on our souls. My comrades never visited. Sturkar the Stranger, the Gibbet King, took over the Sons of Dismas. He did away with the Halforks in the first few months by selling them back into slavery. Bloody heathens for selling and bloody Christians for buying. Godless lot all of creation. There truly is none to do good, as the psalmist says in Psalm 53. Numerous risky contracts followed. I studied their ledger in the Mercenary's guild archives. They won great sums, but they also lost a lot of good men. Looking over the rooster, I realized there was none left from my time with the company. Most that survived Sturkar's lead in the first few years retired with hefty sums of crowns. The Sons of Dismas never pillaged or raped humans under my rule. This changed with Sturkar's rule. The Sons of Dismas lost their Christian morals, along with the half-breeds. Instead, they became renowned for their efficient cruelty. They would shy away from no paid deed, honored all contracts no matter whose blood they shed. The name did not match the company. I had to fix that. I tracked them down near the Berg of Hehold. We contracted to guard some knights Graucus as they were banishing an anomaly near a farming village. We greeted each other like old comrades, even if we did not fight together for very long before I got abducted. The band knew who I was. Sturkar never tried to besmirch my name and deeds in front of the crew. Abruptly, I challenged him to Holmgang for the leadership of the group. He did not hesitate for a heartbeat. He only said it should end in death. He was still looking for release out of his crippled state. Missing an eye, a hand and a foot, not to mention a bollock, he wanted a warrior's death ever since I've met him as a goblin prisoner. Oddly enough, I was a goblin survivor myself, and also a cripple. It mattered not. All that mattered was bringing the company back to God's path, fighting for the light of humanity and those without protection. Old habits die hard, I guess. And that was well said for the both of us. We were evenly matched in skill. He was stronger and larger, but I was not missing a hand. And that's what made the difference. We started out with a javelin exchange. The armors took care of that. We then tried to open each other up with pole axes, and when that failed, we started grappling with our bollock daggers. It literally made sense for me to gain the upper hand since I had an extra hand. Watching two gimps fight it out to the death must have been entertaining for the rest of the band, as they were watching the display glued in a circle around us. I did not finish the fight. I was aged and tired. The other aged fool would have had me for sure if the darkbloods would have kept from turning him gimp. I sheathed my dagger, got up, and fell as Sturkar swooped the land from beneath me with a kick. The next moment, I was struggling to keep his dagger out of my mail. We struggled for a little longer, but with two hands at work on my side, this was no fight. He hated me for not killing him. He hated himself for being a gimp. He hated Thor, or whatever heathen god he still worshipped, for letting the Norns be such wenches. I felt bad letting him live, but truth was, I needed him by my side. I was rusty. I needed his contacts. I told him as much. He composed himself, noted, got up awkwardly, and showed me to my old tent, the Captain S Pavilion. I remembered it so much larger. Truth was, my room at the monastery was tiny in comparison, so I guess I was moving up in the world again. The company was in shambles. The men were unpaid for half a year. The loot, all of it was distributed equally amongst the men as compensation. We no longer had Scorpios. We lost them in a scrap with a family of black trolls. We hired loot-paid Ramkernans for the job. Apparently the team was capable, and they doubled as archers and light cavalry when the situation required it. Fortunately enough, we were well stocked on alchemicals. Sturkar, as ever, was a real fiend in this. He was drinking up potions like they were water. A marvel that his body took the punishment. The attrition rate was gruesome. Not many veterans. The company had a reputation for high pay, high risks. The veterans knew better than to throw their lives away for some extra loot. In order to extract as much possible profit from the fights, the lads were acting like real animals, slaving and looting everything they could get their hands on. That had to change. I needed soldiers, not raiders. The difference is in the training, the conditioning, discipline. I lacked the sergeants to whip the current lot into shape. Figured I could call in a favor from the Radiant Heart group we delivered before I was captured. I knew the leader. Gomer was his name. Not sure what sane Christian would name his progeny. That. But there he was. And there I was. Me offering nothing in return for his service other than a boon from a time long gone. The man said yes. He would join along with 100 of his sergeants, get our company into fighting shape, train sergeants of our own, and when all would be said and done, in probably 3 years' time, with the company matured into veterans, he would receive 2% of our profit, and another 1% would go to his order, a more than generous deal. His only condition was that we work on new recruits only. There wasn't much that could be done with the band we were working with at the moment. They were grown raiders accustomed to rape and pillage. I could not, however, dismiss them out of hand. That would mean forcing them into rape and pillage and eventually the noose. It's true, Gomer would sooner have them fill a questorial work camp than pay them their dismissal compensation. I held counsel with the company ringleaders of the moment. I told them what was about to happen. that they were going to be dismissed due to new management. Since there was no compensation at the moment, we would work together on a few more contracts, just so we can afford dismissing them on good Christian terms. They took the news surprisingly well. The compensation they would receive was more than they hoped for, all things considered. Sturkar was running the company into a glorious deathbed. Everyone was more concerned with profiting from the loot opportunities, lining their pockets, than following orders. Gomer agreed to join the contingent, when we would have a lot of green recruits for him and his brothers to train. We were in accord. As a token of goodwill, Gomer fixed us a contract with his guild. We were supposed to fix a troll issue in the lands of Hayhold. The Radiant Heart Order was protecting the area, but they were not monster slayer specialists, so they decided to pay some specialists good coin to take care of the issue. Gomer knew my band had farmed trolls at a certain point. I knew how to manage the slaying and harvesting of these prodigious darkbloods. So we sent Cuprid the halfling rat to gather some information about the troll before we reached the place with the full company. He moved fast. We were halfway to Hehold when he returned with news of the beast. It turns out Hehold had a multiple layer issue. There was an anomaly that took over this troll creature. Normally I would have abandoned the contract at this point. Anomalies are dangerous physical phenomena that distort the laws of physics in abhorrent ways. They are relatively common in the Bergs due to the history of local weaving use. The affected areas are sealed by questorial forces, so the anomalies do not spread or grow due to unsanctioned meddling from rogue weavers. We would have a Radiant Heart Order dispensation to venture into the secluded anomaly zone, where the troll had made his lair. Anomalies also create artifacts, rare objects with supernatural properties. This time around, the artifact was the troll. The anomaly changed the creature in several ways. First of all, it managed to travel through darkness. Not sure what that meant, but from what Cuprid gathered, the creature would appear leagues away from the questorial encirclement, without breaking or alarming the encirclement. There is no way one can do such a thing without the use of weaving. The troll would simply appear in caves, ravines, or the deep dark woods around Dread Crown Peaks in the southern region of the Berg's lands. We also knew for sure the creature would not burn, as alchemicals had already been tried by an unsuccessful and thus currently deceased knight-errant. For some reason, the troll was also a degenerate, raping everything he ate. So, what seemed at first to be a boon from our soon-to-be companion turned out to be sort of a cursed quest. But we badly needed the coin and the goodwill of the Radiant Hearts, so we continued our march southeast. Cuprid also told us of a few nightmare hunters that were stalking the beast. They had their headquarters stationed in the nearby mining village of Ascalon. We were sure to contact them first. Nightmare hunters are a humble yet capable order of commoner knights. More like a ragtag motley assortment of fighters that hunt down all unnatural creatures. Way on the zealot side to be to my liking. Not because they are zealots, it's just that they are zealots with different views than mine. They are deeply xenophobic, hating everything that is non-human, the other races included, yet they are very capable. Their hatred for what they call unnatural is only matched by their expertise in the hunt. Traveling was miserable. Daylight seemed more like dusk. Less and less light made it through the amassing clouds above. It rained without pause. And I don't mean real good rain, but the flakes that pour from Cruniac's gut clouds, forming the sludge everyone trudged through. It felt like fighting your way through a phlegm swamp. Added to this was the evil cold. It seemed to bite worse on the folk that had a hardened drive in life, as if the cold itself was resenting the strong-willed. Frostbite was not uncommon amongst the men. Everyone was using the strings alchemicals, and it seemed that the evil cold bit into alchemically enhanced willpower as well. Food was not plentiful. It was just enough to ward off starvation and the horrors it brings. The people of the villages we passed through were weary of strangers. Every couple of houses seemed to be walled. Ermenguild's reforms were being enforced by the questers, it seemed. the crossbow law at least, and the high church edicts. Everyone seemed to be carrying a crossbow, if not on his person, close enough to be armed in a few moments. And every settlement, no matter the size, was at least surrounded by a ditch and mound. Most also had a palisade on the mound. All the churches had stout stone walls, and new structures were being annexed within the compounds. Schools, almonries, and hospitals were to be built and financed by the High Church. These things were forced upon the High Church under threat or renunciation. The Emperor stated that the High Church he protected before his descent into the demon mountain Cruniac would have done these things. To keep all its legitimacy, the High Church had to comply. The roving bands of scavengers and refugees had a harder time preying on the local commoners, therefore. Food was a leverage point. The pig farms were usually owned by the same nobles that guarded the Cruniac flesh caravans. Monopoly. Hatcheries, however, were also owned by small communities, since the poultry seemed to be able to consume, partially at least, some of the maggots that sometimes formed in the rain sludge. The nobles provided incubators for the populace, making themselves vital in the poultry trade as well. The same goes for the fish farms. Bottom line, it was almost impossible to survive outside the community at this time. The only ones that did so were unusually organized bands of outlaws and fleeting hordes of refugees that in time distilled themselves to the most cutthroat individuals. Before reaching the mining village of Ascalon, we won 2 encounters. One was versus a company of man-eating reavers, the other with a desperate refugee horde. The reavers fought hard. We surprised them as they were laying siege to another outlaw camp. Stirkar made sure the company kept its quality personal gear. Plate armor was still the most common within the Sons of Dismas. The foe were only clad in gambesons, cuir bouilly for the most fortunate. We won without even using alchemicals. The bandits in the camp surrendered, so we had some hostages with us. Good. Those troll pits don't dig themselves. Regarding the refugees, our scouts discovered their lookouts stalking us. I ordered the men to play dumb and make the poor bastards believe we are unaware. They were trying to lay an ambush for us. They were that hungry. We outflanked and cornered them on the ridges of the ravine they were planning to catch us in. Killed all the men that were laying in wait for us. We rounded up the remnants along with the people we found in their camps. They were not man-eaters from what we could tell, so we kept them alive. We reached Ascalon with a few hundred good for work prisoners. We had no money or food to pay for labor, so this worked great in our advantage. I made sure to pressure the local serif to give us food for the prisoners. Said something about the mission and how it was for the benefit of the region that our prisoners don't starve. Irrelevant. The Sons of Dismas were the real argument. All the villagers thought they were about to be pillaged, which in all honesty was true. It took a miracle to convince Stirkar to keep them in check with the promise of a higher dismissal fee in the near future. They followed Stirkar. They trusted his nose for loot and booty. So, the first step was building a rape doll. The band seemed incredulous, including Styrikar. But I was confident. It worked on average bull trolls. It was bound to work on our degenerate. As per old habit, we encamped in our own compound, a network of wagon forts meant to offer covering fire to each other. Useless in this scenario since we had no Scorpios, but we did it anyway. I personally selected the trees that were supposed to provide the frame of the doll. I picked a few carpenters to help me fashion the trap, while the prisoners were made to dig the troll traps. I was so confident in what I was ordering the brothers to do that none questioned my decisions. Later in the process, I realized that the traps we were digging would be an asset for the creature, since it could travel somehow from one dark place to another. The alchemicals I was taking from my mind were affecting my focus. This was unacceptable. I had to save face and make it seem like this was part of my plan. I ordered everyone to stop digging and make use of the shallow trenches to fashion fire pits, so the night would be flooded with light, denying the troll large pockets of darkness around our camp. The rape doll was finished in only 2 days. We used painted canvas for the skin base, on which we layered beeswax and clay for texture and relief. The frame was as sturdy as a brick lighthouse. Gnarly green oak, selected so that it was naturally grown in shapes that roughly followed a troll's anatomy. We only had to bind 2 tree trunks together, pieces that were not load-bearing, so that was almost irrelevant. The structure had to resist a troll's animated body weight for the first moments. Once the fiend got into the mood, it would no longer care if the thing crumbled underneath. The problem was the bait. We needed rotting meat. It was essential in the mixture that would mimic the troll female call scent. All meat that was to be had was dried and heavily salted, or out of reach, protected in highly guarded farmholds. I did not want to use human corpses because I simply would not. So we had to obtain a special questorial dispensation to be able to kill 4 pigs from a local farm. Food was institutionalized, it seemed. Waste was capitally punishable by hanging. We killed the 4 hogs we obtained using Gomer's sigil and recommendation. Added rot shrooms inside their carcasses for an extra punchy odor, and left them exposed to the elements. As we gathered the rest of the ungodly regents, we realized the hog carcasses were frozen. It seemed that the evil cold was also trying to be funny, like the dead hogs were the ones strong in will from the group. We thawed the carcasses in a shelter and left them there to rot. During the time we spent waiting for the pork decay to happen, the troll struck again. Some villagers went missing along with half their pig herd. The bane of this land was its native population of thumb mushrooms. Some form of mushroom that thrives on the sludge Cruniac keeps pelting us with. Very low nutrition, yet the pigs eat them if given half a chance. Some of the lesser merchants and wealthy farmers keep private pig herds that feed on these mushrooms. It's very hard to protect them, and even harder to convince them it's a bad idea to be self-sufficient and not spoon-fed by the high nobles. There was nothing to be done about the event. We simply prayed for their souls and light a candle in the local church. I did, at least. Sturkar just giggled at the news. He found the mission to be high-quality entertainment and testimony to how ludicrous Christians are. He kept joking that it takes a Christian to offer bodily relief to a troll instead of slaying it. He said that with a different choice of words. A fool. One must do whatever it takes to slay the foe in minimal danger, so that one gets to fight another day and provide for his kindred, as St. Paul instructs. 1 Timothy 5:8. Usually we would place the rape doll above a fire pit. Since the troll was immune to fire, we had to improvise. Figured drowning the creature might work. So we dug that instead. A deep enough well. It cost us 4 suits of plate to purchase luminescent algae from merchants traveling from the burg of Naumsad. It felt like divine intervention to even have this one in a million opportunity. This way the pit would not be dark. At least I hoped it wouldn't. Truth be told, the algae were not doing a great job at lighting the murky water. I had my doubts it would work, but there was no way back now. We prepared the trap along with the rape doll bait. Hopefully the overeager creature would be too keen on mating to notice the trap. The fire pits kept the troll at bay. I had to order putting the fires out. Lost some face there. Had to be done. Finally, the troll could not refrain anymore and made a dash for the doll thing. What followed is not for Christian minds to describe or retell. Suffice to say, the troll was distracted, but not nearly long enough. He finished his quest so fast we didn't even get the chance to spring the trap. We were dumbfounded. He simply vanished in the surrounding darkness as soon as his assault came to fruition. I gave the order to hold positions and hoped he would revisit. I must admit that was the strangest prayer I've uttered in a long time. He did revisit, only with a snack in mind. He gingerly tore open the canvas and started eating the rotting pork. We pulled the ropes and down he went into the water pit. The sides of the dugout collapsed as they were supposed to, burying the monster and hopefully drowning him. For a long time, nothing happened. I gave the order to hold positions, but soon enough the lads lost patience and started approaching the site. I remained hidden and kept praying for success. And there was the troll at the edge of the trees, walking slowly towards the site. The men fled. Everyone fled. Except for me, Sturkar, and a few of his personal bodyguards. We saw the creature start digging, pulling the rape doll out of the pit, parting the canvas very gingerly, and starting gulping the hogs whole, one after the other. When he was done, he picked up the rape doll and wandered off into the trees. We decided to flee the place and not talk to the nobles about this. It was just too much for any of us to bear. The shame. We rounded up the lads, packed our wagons, and made for the road again. We left accompanied by our prisoners, the only net gain from the affair. The quest failed. Such is life. We promised to ourselves to never return to this place.